you very much. Welcome, Audrey.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Morena. My name is Audrey Kusasira-Sutton, and today I'll be talking to you about my PhD project, Understanding Child Abuse Victim, Caregiver, and Clinician Trauma-Focused Cognitive Behavioural Therapy Treatment Experience. Sorry, I tend to have a very soft voice. Yeah, I'm manning two screens, so if I look a little confused.
Yeah, just left click should do.
I'll start off by just introducing myself a little bit. So, as mentioned, my name is Audrey. I was born in a country in East Africa called Uganda, also known as the Pearl of Africa. My parents were separated when I was born. So when I was 8 years old, my father moved to Bonn, Germany. So that was Bonn home base. And my mum continued to live in Uganda primarily, but traveled a lot. So when I was 13, I moved to Kenya for boarding school, at a British boarding school in the middle of nowhere. So I was there for most of my high school. And Dad, during my high school, was moved to Geneva, Switzerland. So that home base changed. Mum continued to be a little all over the place. Yeah, and then when I was 18, I moved to New York for university, and I did psychology and international relations. In my second year of university, my dad got transferred to New York, so that flipped things. So that was home base now. Yeah, and after university, I moved on to do my graduate school, so did marriage and family therapy. And my first job out of graduate school was in Boston, Massachusetts. So I was working with an organization that got contracts for the juvenile system, Department of Mental Health, and Department of Children and Families. That's like Oranga Tamariki here. So it's there actually that I got first introduced to TF-CBT. So I got trained and then started practicing that with the youth and the families I was working with. I was there for a little over a year and then moved back home to New York, New Jersey area, and continued to do TF-CBT. But then I got connected to a trauma lab that was actually doing research in TF-CBT. Their research was quantitative. And it's actually there that my interest in the qualitative side was birthed. So yeah, I started looking for PhD supervisors and got connected to Jackie and then later to Jane. And that supervisory team brought me over here to Auckland. Yeah, and as maybe sometimes work journeys do, they bring you other adventures. So when I moved here, I met a Kiwi man, got married. And yeah, almost 2 years ago in November, we welcomed my daughter into the world. So that's another adventure. So it's been great. Lots of adventures. Yeah. So I'll just move on to sharing. So today I'll just be talking about child abuse and trauma, and introducing TF-CBT, talking a little bit about children in research, and then just jumping into my project. So just according to the World Health Organization, child abuse and neglect is physical and or emotional ill treatment, sexual abuse, neglect, and commercial or other exploitation of children under 18 years of age that results in actual or potential harm to the child's health, survival, development of dignity, and the context of a relationship of responsibility. And just to note, for some children it's one event, and other children it's multiple events. The organization that participated in this research were mostly seeing children who had experienced repeated events. So trauma. Trauma is the response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event or events that overwhelms an individual's ability to cope, causes feelings of helplessness, diminishes their sense of self, and their ability to feel the full range of emotions and experiences. In New Zealand, child abuse and neglect is prevalent. According to the Family Violence Death Review Committee, between the years of 2009 and 2018, 70 deaths were due to child abuse and neglect. According to the United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF, 20% of girls and 9% of boys are sexually abused. Maori children are 2 times more likely to experience child abuse and neglect, and to be in the care of the Ministry of Children. So just some psychological effects of child abuse identified by both clinicians and researchers: post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, suicidality, aggressive behaviours. So various therapeutic models have been employed to work with victims of child abuse, and TF-CBT is one of them. The model was developed in the 1990s by psychiatrist Judith Cohen, psychologist Esther Linger, and Anthony Manarino. It involves work with the victimized child and non-offending caregiver, and has individual and family sessions. It's comprised of 8 modules: psychoeducation, parenting skills, relaxation skills, cognitive coping skills, trauma narrative and cognitive processing of the traumatic events, in vivo mastery of the trauma reminder, and enhanced learning, safety and future development trajectory. So in Aotearoa, there's a TF-CBT model that is developed locally by Federal Learning. It also focuses on working with the victimized child and caregiver. Treatment is comprised of psychosocial strengthening, coping skills, trauma processing, and special issues relevant to trauma and abuse phases. So worldwide, TF-CBT's efficacy has been tested by a number of randomized trials, and evidence has supported its superiority over other models in treatment of child abuse. While quantitative psychological measures tell us some things, there is little known about the experience of therapy with a child. So research that might provide insight on what users find particularly helpful about the therapy is limited. There has been some qualitative evidence. So just an example of this is some work done by Nilakanta and Associates in 2019. It was a meta-synthesis of 8 studies, and they concluded that overall youth and caregivers had a positive perception of TF-CBT. And they felt apprehensive prior to treatment, but more positive once they understood the treatment structure. The trauma narrative was significant for healing, and the therapist and youth collaboration was vital to youth buy-in and engagement. It's worth noting that only 4 out of these 8 studies actually adhered to the Cohen and Associates model TF-CBT. So others were more hybrids, maybe, is a good way to say it. All studies in this meta-synthesis were retrospective. So in Aotearoa, TF-CBT was first evaluated by Feather and Ronan, 2007, just Feather, in 4 single case, multiple baseline studies of multiply abused children diagnosed with PTSD that were referred to the New Zealand Child Protection Agency Specialist Clinic. Results showed improvement of PTSD symptoms and an increase in coping for majority of the participants. Treatment gains were maintained and or improved 3, 6, and 12 months follow-up. It was further evaluated by Taylor in 2019 in another multiple baseline single case studies of both TF-CBT and sensory intervention. PTSD and comorbid depression symptoms decreased for both participants in both groups. TF-CBT participants also reported decreased anxiety in comparison actually to their sensory intervention counterparts who actually reported an increase. So Taylor highlighted a need for the development of relational and self-regulation aspects of both models. So she created a sensory and trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy model that, to my knowledge, doesn't have any investigation on it. But she also highlighted a need for multiple treatment perspective for a better understanding of what works and what doesn't work. So it's just a little bit about how treatment is accessed and delivered in terms of TF-CBT and Aotearoa. Typically, it's delivered outpatient by a TF-CBT trained mental health practitioner, clinical psychologist, counseling psychologist, psychotherapist, or counselor. It's offered by government organizations like Oranga Tamariki, so to youth and family within their care, as well as non-government organizations that have contracts with them and offer mental health treatment. It's also offered in university psychology training clinics, and this is usually at a discounted rate. And practitioners in private practice also offer this. So it can be self-funded, or you can actually get some ACC funding for that. So the gap really is that more data overall on the user perspective of TF-CBT worldwide is needed. In Aotearoa, no prior qualitative study has actually been done on the model. And that's actually what led me to my research question. So what is users' experience of TF-CBT? So as the study was focusing primarily on youth, it was important for me to understand a little bit about their involvement in research. Until the 1990s, society viewed children as human beings rather than human beings. And as a result, research for children in research were not perceived as reliable informants of their experience. Researchers mainly depended on adults in the child's life to report about the child's experience. And as a result, children were silenced and discounted. So the United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child, the UNCRC, a treaty that outlines the civil, political, economic, social, health, and cultural rights of a child, appears to have catalyzed a change in this view. Article 12 in particular states that a child is able to form his or her own view, which must not only be acknowledged, but be given weight according to the child's age and maturity and accounted for in processes, particularly those affecting the child directly or indirectly. This treaty was ratified by New Zealand on 6th April 1993. So different frameworks and guidelines in accordance with Article 12 have been created over the years to guide research practice with involvement of young people. Thus, working with young people, I was guided by two models in regards to participation and ethics. Regarding participation, I was guided by Shire 2001 levels of participation that outlines ways in which children are involved in processes. It's actually an elaboration of Roger Hart's 1982 participation category model. And my aim was to be at 6, adult initiated and shared decisions with children. Regarding ethics, I was led by the Ethical Research Involving Children Compendium, a tool founded on deep respect for human dignity and desire to further the status of children according to the UNCRC. By improving research practice across disciplines. It prompts researchers to explore the complexity of cultural, social, religious, political contexts, as well as introspection that leads to awareness of how the researcher's values, attitudes, beliefs, and assumptions affect the research process. So it's based on 3 core ethical concepts: respect, children's dignity, benefits children, justice and equitable, so research being just and equitable. It highlights ongoing no harm, research involving children being everyone's responsibility. This project was also guided by the TF framework. So the key guiding principles of mana, whakapapa, manakatanga, tika, And on the framework, this research was mainstream. Even though it was mainstream, I had multicultural supervision. And to be honest, being new to the country and the culture, this was a really enriching, and continues to be because I'm still doing it, enriching process, both professionally and personally, actually. So, yeah. So it's important to note that though research has advanced to recognise youth's capability to participate as competent informants of their experience, as well as value and integrate their unique contribution due to its differing perspective, there remains a deficit of child-focused data with practical outcomes, particularly in child mental health services. Furthermore, methods for conducting interviews are primarily tailored to working with adults. Much of the research interviewing children is based on forensic interviews. So this really focuses mainly on the accuracy of the child's account and not their subjective thoughts and feelings of their experience. So that actually inspired me to do a two-step study. Where step one was actually consulting youth about how they would suggest I talk to youth about their therapy experience. And the hope was that from step one, I would then use an interview protocol in step two that had been guided by youth. So just also to note, the study was guided by a pragmatic research approach and technique, with the aim to depict users' experience through their lens and their own words and expression. Furthermore, in line with the pragmatic framework, the intended hope of this study was that exploration of users' experience would reveal themes that could possibly inform clinical practice. So, just the study design again. So just the primary focus of inquiring about youth, about their therapy experience, the two-step process I mentioned, the initial interviews with a sample of youth who had completed TF-CBT about how they would recommend I talk to youth about their therapy experience, an interview protocol to be used in step two, interviewing those who are undergoing or have finished TF-CBT treatment, and then there's a secondary focus of interviews with caregivers and clinicians. Data from the interviews was analysed using Brown and Clark's reflexive thematic analysis. So not a lot went to plan. As do happen. So first, recruitment for step one was really difficult due to COVID and staff shortages in participating organisations. So instead of inquiring for youth who had completed TF-CBT, I ended up widening the recruitment completed all forms of therapy. Recruitment was still difficult, so I ended up amending step two to be a two-part interview process, one about the young person's experience of TF-CBT and the second about their feedback on being interviewed. Caregivers and clinicians were to continue to be interviewed as planned in the original design. So due to budget cuts, many of the organisations who had actually been willing to participate suddenly found themselves no longer providing TF-CBT, and honestly, a lot of clinicians not having their jobs. So recruitment continued, suffered again, and actually no youth or caregivers ended up participating in step two. So who did I actually talk to? So step one. So the purpose of this was to recommend ways information be collected from others about their therapy experience. I ended up talking to two young Pākehā boys, 8 years old. One had completed TF-CBT and the other anger management. I'll be using the pseudonyms Habrasa and Tanasa for them. But here are 3 themes that came about from our time together. So theme 1 was making an effort to connect. Both boys, in talking about how someone could approach a young person about their therapy, harken back to their journey with their own therapists and the effort they had made to connect with them and make them feel comfortable. Habrasa talked about someone taking the time to just talk about things he was interested in, like dogs. Bulldog puppies are my favorite. From his therapist, he said, she made it in a fun way, fun activities that sort of helped me. Tanasa, about his therapist, said, she was nice, she was really nice, and she used a lot of good strategies that ended up working, and she used a lot of good methods. He had really appreciated her relatable analogies. Tanasa really liked airplanes, and in managing his fear, an analogy from his therapist he liked was of him as a captain of an airplane. When you fly the plane, there's going to be a lot of bumps, but you're still going to get to your destination safely. From a stranger, he said it was important for them to be empathetic.
Very articulate boys.
Very
The age.
Got some good strategies.
Yeah. And another theme that came up was repeated interaction. Tanasa said that in becoming comfortable with a stranger, maybe them just coming over and over would be helpful. Habrasa's mother said that for him, repeatedly seeing someone was key. So both boys had their mothers in the interviews with them. She said that for him, repeatedly seeing someone was key. He also needs time to build, no matter what situation we're in, whether it was his CBT worker, counselors, it takes him a while to warm up properly and to really open up. So Habrasa currently goes to a counselor. So we're up session 9 with this counselor, and he's only now starting to open up. Of his mother's observation, Habrasa said it was true. And that he thought a lot more kids will take a little bit more time to open up. So theme 3, doing an activity while chatting. After mentioning I might only be able to see young people once, Habrasa said, with his new clinician, what had helped was he showed me the game cupboard and we played games while chatting. He said, it's probably one of the only ways I could get used to someone. With other youth, he said, it could work. Yeah, it could. I don't know. That's how I got used to him, chatting while playing games. Tanasa also remarked on appreciating doing an activity while talking. Sometimes we draw out some of the analogies, and sometimes I come up with my own analogies. Yeah.
It's pretty smart, this one.
Yeah.
It's quite very developed. Yeah.
So some implication, the theme is making an effort to connect and doing an activity while chatting seem to support past research recommendations on interviewing children. So building rapport, showing interest in who they are outside of the research, and then giving them the chance to get to know you as a researcher outside of your research study. And then also having something for younger children to do with their hands. So this was I guess quite cool for me to see because I actually, had done the research and walked in with an icebreaker, prior to actually starting the interview, and then had a craft box actually for both boys. I remember Tanasa's mom at some point during the interview starts whispering, she's like, you're not going to use all that paper, are you? Because he had just like pulled out and it was just kind of going and having, so it was nice for me to see that. Repeated interaction. This actually brought back for me a study done by Dittman and Jensen. So they did a study in Norway interviewing youth who had finished TF-CBT. And one of the things they came back with from their study was actually talking to youth as they go through therapy. So that was one of their recommendations. And so this repeated interaction theme made me wonder about the possibility that having interviews after each phase might actually foster a relationship with the researcher that maybe leads to deeper conversations just as time goes on because a relationship has been built. So just some reflections. So the fact that the STEPS inclusion criteria was amended means that we don't hear solely from youth who had suffered abuse and whether they would have had different or additional recommendations and how they'd want to be approached is just something that's unknown. Recruitment for the STEP being difficult also meant that the intended purpose of doing a protocol that would be used in STEP 2 just wasn't achieved. So, yeah. So STEP 2. So the purpose of this was users' experience of TF-CBT. I ended up talking to 4 clinicians, a 31-year-old Filipino-Chinese man, a 34-year-old Pakeha female, a 53-year-old Pakeha female, and a British female who declined to give her age. So 3 of these participants were counsellors and 1 was a counselling psychologist. So 4 themes came out of these interviews, and the first theme is a twofold theme. One being about what might suit the clients in terms of treatment goals, and the other one about therapists building their toolbox so that they could cater to clients' needs. So I'm using pseudonyms as well. So this theme, tailoring treatment to the client. So this is from Shaman. Good question. I think I always get through like the whole program, but sometimes parts of it might be longer for some, where it's shorter for others. Like some teens I've met are really aware of themselves and are really aware of what's happened to them. So they're more keen to get to the skills and the exposure sort of aspects. As some, you have to do a lot more connecting because they're suspicious about authority figures or the fact that they're mandated or that they believe that actually nothing's wrong with them. And all these behaviors that led them to trouble with the police are fine. So I find that in successful programs, and there's a few where the clients have just said there's absolutely nothing wrong with me, I refuse to take everything, what can you do? But the ones who have managed to make it to the end. And then this is from Grenu, who's talking about building her toolbox. I see myself as an integrative therapist, and I won't ever say that I'm married to one model. I have models that I'm more attached to than others, I suppose. So like I said, about the, I formulate a lot more on the cyber kind of framework now, because I think that gives depth, The different models have different strengths. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And different strengths for different people, because not everybody's the same. You need to adapt. So just to note, the cyber kind of framework she's talking about is just a psychoanalytical model that's used for clinical formation when looking at your clients, presenting issues. So the next theme was systematic by design, and this had to do with how structured TF-CBT is. Some therapists liked it and some didn't. So the first is from Shana. I love the fact that it sort of has a beginning and you go through, I like the structure, I guess, of TF-CBT, yeah. And probably because I'm quite structured myself, just as a person, a bit of a tick list kind of person. So I guess that kind of appeals to me. And this is from Shaman, who struggled with the structure. I struggled at the start with how prescriptive I may have thought it was. I mean, depending on which program of TF-CBT you ascribe to, right? There's Jackie Feather's one, which was the one I struggled with the most, just because it was like, you have to do this at session 1, then you do this at session 2, then you have to do this at session 3, and you must be here by session 4. It's kind of like I'm kind of working with teenagers and children here. They're not exactly robots. I tend to stick to the US one because that's a bit more freeform in the sense of there's a structure that you have to follow, like, you meeting the family, building rapport, explaining, like getting the parents to support you, maybe doing some psychoeducation with the child as well as doing some trauma processing before you get to the skills and exposure. So there's a lot more structure, but there's no prescribed, this has to be done in 4 sessions, this has to be done in 3 sessions. So that was a lot easier for me to go through. And then this is theme 3, community involvement, an aid or a hindrance. So this had to do with, community involvement aspect of the model. Some therapists experience this as positive and some experience as, a blocker to therapy. So the first is from Shana. I like the inclusion with that model, like that you're including, especially for younger people, because they can't articulate what's going on in their world often. If they've got a supportive backdrop, having them included, I like that, instead of everything being so confidential, all the time, because you're always, with doing CBT, you're always second guessing, should their parents know about this? Shouldn't they know about it? That's the whole kind of fine line. And then this is from Shaman. Yeah, and then, like when you're thinking in the clinician sort of seat, you're always thinking about the communities around this person, the influence that these communities have on them. And then you come up with cases like this and you're like, oh my God, or even reasons for change. Because, for that client in particular, one big negative influence was their peer group. offering him substances for free. And then whenever he had a breakdown with his mother, his friend would offer that kid to be able to stay at his parents' house. And one incident, that kid even got his gang-affiliated father to physically threaten this kid's mother and sister. Yeah, so you know, what's one therapist going to do? So this is theme 4, elements of marginality. So this had to do with the feeling that the model excluded certain groups of people, culturally and I guess gender identification, and then also the context of work, like the work context. So the first quote, all quotes are from Tama for this one, and the first quote has to do with culture. So in Jackie's book, I guess that's more like, maybe like the activities don't seem super relevant to some of the young people I work with. For example, that in the book there is like a paper dolls thing, and I always feel a little bit like when people have really big families, that can be quite difficult to contain. Who are they talking about? Or like sometimes like it comes across as if they should be, maybe it's just me, but like sometimes it's like, who are they focusing on? Not like there's nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't feel like doable. And then these next few quotes are about gender identification. And this is just a me thing. I don't like it that in the book there's a lot of him. And this, she's talking about the Aotearoa model one. There's a lot of him, like the child's gendered as a him. So it's like I'm always a little bit worried about giving gendered language to children, especially when they're not using him or her pronouns. So this last quote is after I asked about both models, you know. And so she said, so definitely, she's saying what she would change about both models. So definitely the gendered language, I would absolutely change that. I think it's not a comfortable thing in 2024 to be using him and her only. And this next quote is her talking about work context, the fact that they would go to their clients as opposed to their clients coming to them, and the difficulties that they would encounter with that. So I think that's something that I guess, yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at, is sometimes the models or the training that we get is, you know, the ideal would be they're coming to your office and you sit in your office and they come to you, but that's not what we do. We go to them. So it's like sometimes that caregiver session might not happen until 2 or 3 sessions in, and you have to kind of be like, remember we did that breathing exercise? So just talking about you might be at session 5 material with the youth, and then still at session 3 with the parents, and how difficult that can be in terms of the parents actually then supporting the youth and the skills that they're actually learning. So just some implications from this. Tailoring treatment to clients seem to support some existing literature that has informed current practice and training actually about becoming clinicians to be well versed in treatment models and attuned to them, using them, like attuned to the client and using them to meet the client's specific needs. For TF-CBT, the model does encourage going through the program at the pace of the client. So it was good to see this being put into practice. Systematic by design, I think beg the question, I think for those that experience the structure negatively, it begged the question of what needs to be altered in order for clinicians to feel confident that they actually have the freedom to cater to people and the life factors. And then past research has highlighted positive caregiver involvement as positively influencing treatment. So clinicians who experience caregiver involvement as an aid seem to support this. For those who experience it as a hindrance, I think that left me with the question of what can we do to mitigate this. So I know that both the US version, so the US version has a section called Enhancing Safety, and the Aotearoa one has the special issues. And I was wondering, is there the possibility of sort of moving these sections, you know, a little further upwards to sort of work with the issues that the person might have in order to kind of set the stage for therapy. So from the highlighted elements of marginality, culture, gender identification, and work context, it kind of left the question of, do we need to think about an update to the manuals to be more inclusive? I know that the US model was used in a study with the LGBTQI community, and wondered if the Aotearoa Model 1 needs to have a baseline study done that then can kind of, we can spring forth from there. So just some reflections. I think I ended up reading quite a bit of literature on the difficulty of getting to youth and caregivers in research. And it really sort of left me with the question of, did there need to be a different way of approaching gatekeepers in order to actually get to the young people and caregivers, because I didn't really get to them. Did more time building relationship, was that needed, or was co-collaboration actually in project design somewhere a good place to start? That's some of the questions I was left with. Also hearing from a variety of clinicians, so clinical psychologists, psychotherapists who are also practicing the model, as well as, I guess, culturally, clinicians who identify differently culturally as well. Just some future projects I thought might be cool to do out of this. Possible focus group of clinicians in actually editing the manual, and then conducting a study that then we can ask users from what they think about this updated manual, or actually just starting again with users, having focus groups or interviews, and editing the manual, and then testing the manual out, and then asking users again what they think about that. So those are my thoughts thus far. Thank you for your time.
I hope you get to do the future projects.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it would be cool.
We have some time for a couple questions. So that's okay. Yeah. Any other questions?
I've got some thoughts and comments. that therapist didn't read the manual. The manual says it's flexible. You should go back and forth. Yeah. You should pick what you need when you need it. So some of the examples of exercises like the paper dolls and those sort of things are examples, optional. They can draw on their own exercises. So I think that bit is possibly that person is not, I don't know who they are or how well trained they are, but
User error.
Yeah, user error. But the point about gender and culture, I think definitely it's with, that manual was written 20 years ago and based on research that was started in the 90s. So we've moved a long way. So there's definitely room for an update and definitely room for more emphasis on flexibility, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Like highlight that as being important, that's key.
Yeah.
Moving, through the manual forwards, backwards, picking out whatever's required at the time. Yeah.
I was just going to say, Audrey, it's the trouble in recruiting. It just breaks my heart to think of the many, many children who are suffering from trauma. And that, that these programs are losing funding.
Yes.
That there's not enough support for the children to have access to an evidence-based therapy. So,
and the training.
Is there anything about the Aotearoa context that any movements going on to any activists trying to raise the awareness of this unmet need that we have?
I haven't seen anything. I haven't really seen anything, which I've really found surprising
Mm.
that it's not something that you kind of see in the news or that people are kind of talking about or
Just on another note, and from the Family Violence Death Review Committee, recognizing the many children who have been impacted by a family violence homicide. So the children that are in the community, in the whānau, but also in the community, that New Zealand does not have a clear pathway of duty to care for those children. So, this is quite sad to see the difficulty in having a vibrant community of practice to support children and their caregivers in this space. Yeah.
And the access for research, I mean, it's quite shocking, isn't it? The gatekeeping that's happened, because we really need to know these things, so that therapeutic programs can be updated and programmed to meet the needs. How do we know unless we can speak to young people? And
I found it surprising that it's not an uncommon problem. I think finding myself just kind of like, okay, is this very unique to me? What am I not doing? But seeing that actually most, I guess, people who are doing research with children will talk about the issue of gatekeeping. What can we do to mitigate this? But also how it's actually put off of research. So you have funding for this project and you have goals that you're meeting, and many researchers might shy away from actually doing research with children because they know the ethics process is difficult, but that's actually causing more of a problem. In my mind, like, we're actually choosing to not meet a particular need because of all of these different barriers that are put before us.
For me, for someone who's not from this space, I'm not sure the protocol with caregivers, how they're assigned. And with this model, is it something that clinicians or counsellors opt into, or are they all formally trained on this model? Is it a personal preference? Is this expected for all children who experience counselling through trauma?
So they have different models.
What is the uptake of this model, I guess, from?
I guess I'm not, as far as I know, with counsellors, so the counsellors that I talk to in terms of training, they're not really trained in particular models. These are the ones they seem to kind of get in like professional training, or once they've kind of joined an organisation, they might have trainings. But